You're
Like
gonna,
vermouth?
you're gonna just tell them anyway.
Like vermouth? Vermouth. I don't know his name. I have.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Greetings for all those people since the last time we met. And the last time we met, we were interviewing the two of you. Thank you for joining us again.
That's right,
Thank you
yes.
for joining us again. Since that time, there's been some international information on Cuba. Some of you may have seen it as part of the, it came from the Associated Press. We have a new president in Cuba, and let's see, he started in the middle of April. He is a hand-picked successor, Miguel Maria Diaz-Canel Bermudez. I'm saying it incorrectly this time too.
Oh, think of vermouth.
No.
Vermouth. Thank you. He will hold power until 2031. 2031. He will serve 2 5-year terms as leader of the Cuban government and take the helm of the Communist Party, the country's ultimate authority, when Castro finally leaves in 2021. So we are deviating, you can hear it already, from our typical memories of Plymouth. Because of this, and because of the Marquez-Sterlings who came from there, we hope you will enjoy today's deviation from the memories to international events, how it has affected us in our town. Few of us, or at least speaking for myself, we know very little of the island of Cuba. Prior to the revolution and the embargo. It was a short-lived Cuban republic, and if you'd like to know more, you can see in front of you, this is Manuel's book, 1952-1959, The True Story of Castro's Rise to Power. I would implore you to read it. It is informative, it is comprehensive. I think you will be inspired by what you read. But officially, let's thank you for coming today, Manuel.
Thank you for having us.
And Gloria, a pleasure for a second time through. We hope by the end of today, we will have some answers to the following. How did Fidel Castro come to power? 2, what were the economic, the political, the social conditions during the pre-Castro era? What did Castro's revolution actually accomplish? And why did this Cuban republic, short-lived, why did it collapse and become a dictatorship? But before we start, I think we want to create a setting for the audience that we have. So both of you were born in Cuba. Would you please state where you were born?
Yes, I was born in Havana.
Havana?
The city. You, Gloria?
I was born in Santiago de Cuba, in the Oriente province.
It's the
That's
other
not called that
extreme-
anymore.
It's the other extreme of the island.
You shared with me the other day the island was how long? Can you remember how many miles long?
Well, if you put Cuba alongside Florida, from Jacksonville to the Keys, it's the same distance.
It's about the same.
If
yeah.
you cross the island
Yeah.
from San Pinar del Rio to Oriente. And I'm quoting or naming the provinces as we learn them, because Castro named
Change
them
everything.
different. And I don't know them. I refuse to learn them.
But I think the distance, the reference you just made is important for our audience today. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your parents?
Okay, I'll start.
All right.
My parents were born in Santiago de Cuba too. They met. My mother was a teacher. She graduated from teaching school.
Normal school?
Normal school. La Escuela Normal. And my father was an accountant. And it took him a long time to get his degree, because he had to do it at night, because he had to work to help his family, because his father that had an American job, when the crash came, they lost everything, and they had 5 children. And my father was 14 years old. So he had to work very hard to get to where we were when we had to leave.
Wow, thank you.
My father was a lawyer, and he had a firm. He was born in Cuba. My grandfather was born in Peru, but my father was born in Cuba. And frankly, he achieved tremendous things in Cuba. He was the president of the Constituent Assembly of 1940, and he successfully led it to a success. My mother was born in Cuba too, and he is of Irish descent and Spanish descent. Okay, very Celtic, because the Spanish is from the north tip of Spain, who was settled in Roman times by the Celts who were fleeing from the Romans. So that's about it. And my family, and Gloria should mention that my family has been in Cuba since, I would say, 2 centuries.
Mm-hmm. Mine did too. I had 2 sides. The French side was later, but the Spanish side in the early 1700s. And there were a lot of people that were governing the island through the government of Spain. You know, they were professionals that were sent and then maintain their status there. And then the French family, it was French settlers in Haiti that were escape the Black Revolution that Toussaint de Louverture did, and they fled to the part of Cuba where I was born, which is close to Guantanamo, and New Orleans.
Yes.
Did your parents have hopes for you and your siblings?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
You know, in my family, we had to get an education. There was no other way, so we went through high school and so on, and then to the university to get a degree. Cubans back then, I don't know anymore, were, you know, everyone has to get a degree. It's the only way that you can move up in the social
Universities
ladder.
were free.
And the university, no, they were not entirely free.
You had to pay your books.
You have to pay your books, and there was a little fee for entrance, you know, so on.
$60.
But the university was absolutely free. So
And we're talking about the University of Havana?
yes, yes,
And there was one in Santiago de Cuba, and then was one in the middle of the island too.
yes, and then came a Catholic university in the 50s.
That was private.
Very interesting.
Villanova, it was, yeah.
Villanova, and my father thought that I would like to go to the Catholic university, and I said to him, "Where did you go?" And he said, "Havana University." I will go to Havana University. Okay.
Like father, like son. What was life like in Cuba before Batista, the coup, Castro? Is that too much of a question?
No.
No, I brought a little figures here, so you know.
It was good.
It was good. It was good. This may give you an idea. In '59, before Castro arrived, Cuba had, for instance, 176 radio receivers per 1,000 inhabitants, and that made her 5th in the world. And 56 TV sets per 1,000 inhabitants, 1st in Latin America. 1 refrigerator for 19 inhabitants, 3rd in the Western Hemisphere. 31 cars per 1,000 inhabitants, 3rd in the Western Hemisphere. 2 telephones per 100 inhabitants, 3rd in the Western Hemisphere. And a physician, you know the legend of Castro, that there wasn't any medicine for the people. A physician, listen to this, a physician per 980 inhabitants, second in the Western Hemisphere, even better than
Western
Canada.
Hemisphere is counting United States and Canada, okay?
Yes, and the dentist per 300 inhabitants, third in the Western Hemisphere, and a student, this is important, student per 230 inhabitants, fourth in the Western Hemisphere. So education was available to all the Cubans. That is a legend of Fidel Castro.
Wow. Wow.
He had to create the picture that Cuba was a horrendous country, so he would appear like he had to do something for the island.
What was their literacy level, reading and writing?
79%?
It was 79%, less high in the country, and more in the city. But the island of Cuba was so small and so thin and narrow that education got to every place. There was no remote place that you have to go and be afraid of snakes or anything like that. So, okay.
How about their national income? How much monies were people making?
Well, before in '58, they did a census of the last one that was made, and it was about $500
per year.
per year. The income, which put Cuba also in the third. Venezuela was ahead of Cuba, and, because Venezuela had oil.
We only had cane.
Sugar.
No oil in Cuba, not at least to move the car. Oh, this is another good point. There was 600 movie houses. And you may say, Luis, what that has to do with culture? People see the world in the movies. They are not right there like the peon till in the field. They see the world. You know, was second in the Western Hemisphere. United States first, Cuba second.
And the economy was better than many of the European countries.
Oh, absolutely. Italy, Cuba had
Spain.
more TV sets than England.
Such misconceptions we have about Cuba.
Exactly.
Well, that's the brainwashing that they did, including Mr. Herbert Matthew from the New York Times, that sold the idea of Castro as being the Robin Hood of America. And people did not have another way of comparing if it was true or not, except those Americans that either lived or traveled or had businesses in Cuba. But that was a very small minority.
Yeah.
What kind of a relationship did Cuba have with the United States during this time?
Well, you know, at the very beginning in 1902, when the Republic was established, you know, the United States, after saying to the world that was going into the war to free Cuba, then they reneged on that, and they imposed on the Cuban Constitution, the so-called Platts Amendment. The Platts Amendment gave the United States the right to intervene in Cuba.
Platts,
P-L-A-T-T-S.
P-L-A-T-T-S.
He was a senator from Connecticut. And from there was a little resentment, against the United States. But the Platts Amendment was abrogated in 1934.
And guess who was the ambassador there?
Guess who was the guy who did all the negotiations and so on?
Your
My
father.
grandfather.
Oh, your grandfather.
My grandfather.
Name his name after him.
Exactly after me. Indeed, you know, my father said always, our family signed the two great documents in Cuban history, the abrogation of the Platts Amendment and the Constitution of 1940. Well, after that, after it was abrogated, you could hardly find one of these specimens, now in the United States, nobody cared. And the Americans were very well received in Cuba.
The Americans did a great job when they defeated the Spaniards coming into Cuba and remodernizing the horrible systems that Spain had imposed in Cuba. And among them, they revamped the University of
In the
Havana
education.
on the model of Harvard University, to the point that some parts of the university, they looked like the Harvard. I thought Harvard looked like Cuba. My mother said, no.
You're talking about the structure of the buildings?
No,
the-
no. The making and the administration.
Academics.
Yeah, academics and yeah.
And if you go to Columbia University and also Harvard, you find the alma mater right there, you know, the
Which we had to.
with the symbol of the university. And that was copied from Harvard, Columbia University. But so, you know, I remember I was in the university, and the Latin American universities, including Cuba, are very politicized. And at that time, I never heard down with American imperialism, unless it was a Communist Party and the Communist affiliates.
Interesting.
So,
Interesting.
The Communist Party was legal.
legal.
I mean, it could be like the Democrats, the Republicans, the liberals, whatever, you know. But
So they had two major parties?
no, they had more
One-
than
They
that.
are more.
And more.
But the two biggest parties until '59 were the authentic, and the Partido del Pueblo Ortodoxo. So they were the two big parties, and then following them was the Liberal Party, but liberal 19th century style, you know.
Not,
So,
and the Communist Party.
and the Communist Party. But the Communist Party registered every year 15,000 people, because we used to say communism will never be in Cuba because we are too individually, too
Independent.
independently in our life.
Gloria, you said once to me that Cuba women, was it the Cuban women, really supported the United States in the beginning? And you shared a story about President
Oh, I
Washington.
even had an article. Yes, at one point, when Washington was really desperate for funds, and I have the thing in the purse with the name of the senator and everything. So there was a call for help, and the wealthy ladies of Cuba, Havana mostly, collected their gold, jewelry, whatever, and they sent $1 million to President Washington. It wasn't president that, for the for the revolutionary.
Very interesting.
So while you're talking to Manuel, I'm going to look my paper.
and I think the timing, General Washington, $1 million, if we prorated it, wouldn't be interesting. to
Oh,
find
at
out
that
what it
time
is
it
today.
was
Well,
a huge
It's an
amount.
amazing
They
amount of
say
money.
that when Washington got that money, he was in Valley Forge, you know, and so on, threw the hat up and said, "We're going to win the war." Okay, poor George.
Manny, during one of our interviews at the house, you told me that your country had a great destiny. Do you remember that line?
Well, you know, what hurts me tremendously is I loved my country. I was a champion of my country, without getting to be ridiculous, because I thought that it had a great future, that Cuba was going to play a role in the Western Hemisphere as the, you know, the in between the United States. And so seeing it today destroy and ruin and everything, it hurts tremendously. So maybe I came back to reality one, but I love my country.
it's
You know, 4 or 5 years coming to the United States, I decided to travel all over the island and see every province and so on, because I was in love with my country. And I may tell you another secret, because I was going to write my first novel, and I wanted to see the entire country to make good descriptions. And so
I
on.
found it.
Please.
It was through the French. You know, the French and the, okay. The La Ligrette went to pick up the money in Havana and Matanzas, and then they had a convoy with the boat or the ship, whatever you call that, Ville de Paris, that had 11 canyons, and they went to Virginia to deliver the money. And this is before the battle, or Yorktown, before the Battle of Yorktown, that this was the donation that had been requested. It was requested by the French, but they gave, I think the French kept 600,000 and they gave Washington 400,000. But
The French did that because they want to kick the British.
I know, they were, well, yeah.
Your book does a beautiful job. It makes the comment, it seems to be there are three people in this party, all right?
Yes.
Three people we need to talk about today, and I'd like to
Okay,
talk about
sure
each of
enough.
them if we could, please. The first one is Batista, his first name, and you will,
Fulgencio.
thank you very much, Fulgencio Batista. And he took over when?
Well, you know, Batista has two episodes in Cuba. In the 30s, late 30s, the Cuban people had overthrown a dictator, and then it was all in confusion, and Batista was the head of the army, and then he intervened, and I have always said that he reorganized the country, put everything, and so on. But
He was elected president.
everybody expected him to become a dictator,
But it was a democracy in the beginning? It was.
and then he organized everything and so on, and then he ran for president based on what he did. He ran for president and got elected in a fair and honest election. And then he was in the president for 4 years. Now the Cuban Constitution prohibited re-election, because re-election is a temptation to, you know,
Permanently stay.
Exactly. So he left the country, you know. But then in 1952, when the country went on with the democracy, and he came back to run for senator. And while he was running for senator, he staged a coup d'etat.
He was pushed by the army.
By the army.
There was a lot of corruption, but
Yes.
the elections were going to take place in 3 months.
But I say that Batista is a man that destroyed
His
his own political past by staging a coup. He didn't have to do that. He would wait another 4 years, and then he would run. But, you know.
What was his rule like?
In
The
this-
political, we did not have the political freedom that you have when you have the elections were not. Then you could not oppose him politically, openly, but the rest of your life was untouched.
Completely.
It's
you
not
could
like
run.
Castro that took over everything.
He was not
And there was a
totally-
Congress, and
Yeah.
there was, you know, and if you didn't like him and you left for Miami and you had property or pensions in
He's
Cuba,
respected.
every money that was owed to you would be sent to Miami. They never took your property or did any of the horrible things that Castro did.
So this is what you refer to as dito.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say
Blanda.
that his style of government, most of the time, of the last years he was in power, most of the time is what we call in Latin America a dicta blanda, which means a soft, benign dictatorship. And
It's not good.
no, I don't like that. But you know, the last 2 or 3 years, he became a
Dura.
dura.
Hard.
Dura?
Yes, hard dictatorship.
Mostly because of Castro being in the mountains, and people, many of the students were rebelling right in the cities, and they were not connected to Castro yet. And then when Castro came down, and they thought everybody was going to be together to build, then they didn't like some of the Castro's rulings. And when they started working against it, they were apprehended and they were shot by the firing squads with no.
I was in the university as a student while Castro was in the university also.
Well, we can switch then.
Okay.
We've gone from Batista to Castro. This is Fidel Castro,
Yes,
and he was at the university at the same time as you.
yes.
Did you know him?
Oh yes, I knew him very well. My brother even better than me, because my brother was in the university politics. He ran for the student association president and so on and so on. And so we knew him. And we consider him and the whole student body a hoodlum.
A hoodlum.
He carried a gun when he was in the university. Was autonomous, meaning
Autonomous,
the
yeah.
government or the police or soldiers could not enter the university ever. So the university ruled itself. Of course, the government gave them the money, but you know they couldn't. And Castro was known more as a gangster.
Yes, a hoodlum. He was, everybody was talking about a crime that was committed of another student leader and so on, that Fidel was the guy who disguised as a lottery ticket
Vendor.
You know, called the guy because the other man loved to go to a movie house that only gave cartoons on it. And then he came and Fidel called the other
one that was
hoodlums
going
and
to
said,
kill.
well, and then when the guy came out, he was machine gun by there. So we knew that past. It was very well known. This is the case of Cuba. It's maddening. Because this hoodlum that we despise in the university suddenly is a great leader of the university. But I think the politicians in Cuba have a great responsibility for
And
that.
that's-
And that is very well explained in the
But then how did Castro come to be? Who supported him?
Well, Castro, and I say it in the book, had a plan that was in 3 steps. And so he had to gain respect and that people would consider him a hero. And for that first step, he went to Santiago province and attacked with another bunch of students and attacked the military headquarters.
The hospital.
Yeah, the hospital of the military headquarters. So they were mowed down, and then he was arrested by the police. He was not in the attack. He took cover somewhere else.
He was never in the attacks or the battles anywhere.
No, and then that
Even
was
in La Sierra.
that was the first step to gain national stature and so on. Oh, look, that guy.
The Bishop of Santiago de Cuba was the one that protected him. And then he had a trial in Havana, and he was sentenced to the Isle of Pines for a number of years. And in less than 120, in less than 2 years, Batista declared
Amnesty.
an amnesty for the political prisoners, and he was under that, and that's when he came out of jail and then went to Mexico and started the boat, and that later would come with
So he
Che Guevara.
created a following with some of the citizens of Mexico?
Well, yes, the Communist Party in Mexico helped him tremendously.
Then the second step was to destroy, to wipe out the Cuban politicians and the other, not killing them, but you know, he made them appear that they were a bunch of sissies and idiots and so on. That was it. And the third step, when they go, there is a national election in 1958, he would destroy the elections, and you know, he said that people going to vote in the polling places would be machine gunned by his people and so on. They were terrified. And why are you doing that? Because those people are Batista's agents,
Lackeys,
lackeys,
Of
and
course,
so on.
Batista stole the election, which was, and
But-
then he left 30 days later and left a vacuum, and Castro took
Yeah.
over.
Okay.
And the other revolutionaries that had been fighting Batista too,
Yes.
little by little, they were killed or imprisoned by Castro himself.
Well, that ties in. The third person in this triad that we're talking about is your father.
He's my father, because he spent all the time from 52 to 59 advocating for a national solution, peaceful solution,
legal.
through elections and so on. And they attempted on his life 10 times or 11 times. Fidel Castro's revolutionaries.
We haven't shared his name to the audience. Carlos Marquez-Sterling.
He's, yes, Carlos Marquez-Sterling.
And what positions did he hold one more time prior to this?
Well, he had retired from politics in 1946 or 47. When he went back to politics, people say, oh, he was a great politician. He hated being a politician. What he liked is the career of a lawyer, you know, and so on and
Yeah,
so
but
on.
before that, when he presided over the Constitution of 1940, which is the one we had until Castro came. And by the way, if you read that Constitution, it has things that now we in the United States are providing, like maternity leave, a number of things protecting the workers.
During this era, this is so visionary.
1940.
So visionary.
Yes, you know, the
Very,
Communist Party.
very,
The
very.
Communist Party gave him a homage for the very
Yes, for what he had
progressive measures that he had helped. He didn't do it himself. I mean, it was
done.
phenomenal.
And then he came back to politics, and he was running for the Senate, and the polls said that he would be the biggest, he would have the biggest polling in his favor in the whole history of Cuba, because he was a respected man.
And then Batista came and did the coup d'etat.
And then Batista
there were no
came and did the
elections.
coup, and so Fidel did everything possible so the elections would not be held, or if held, they would
Be discredited.
be discredited. And my father had a very interesting program. He said, I'm running for this. If I win the election in 2 years, I will hold another election, because you've been, the opposition, you've been saying that they don't want to go to the election because it was Batista's cronies who held the election and so on. He said, if I am elected in 2 years, I'm not a Batista follower, I'm not of the government. In 2 years, I will have another election, and I will be the guarantor.
He would not
I
run.
won't run, so I will
2
guarantee
years.
that they are honest, the elections. And
To
so on.
organize, you know,
And
again.
that the Cuban people said that's the way, you know. And Fidel did all horrors, discredit, and so on.
It's been shared that your father won the election. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, oh yes.
Of those that went out
Even
to vote,
with-
that were not afraid.
Yes, even with the threats and so on, he won the election. But then it was so funny because the candidate of the other party, the Batista party, was a cousin of my father. Okay, and then the wife at around 2 o'clock or so in the afternoon called my stepmother and said, tell Carlos that this is incredible. He saved the republic and so on. He's winning the elections. Well, by 3 o'clock, our house was surrounded with military cars, and my dad said, "Oh, here comes the fraud of the election," and it was like that.
So, in addition to what you said, he was his life was in danger.
Oh.
And can I say, perhaps then the children, then you were in danger as well?
Yeah, he has to go and
Yes,
look for
yes.
bombs. Whenever he had a political meeting,
A rally or something, I would go.
Manuel and two of his friends used to go to the places to look for bombs that Castro's might have put.
If I could define my father in a way, I think he was a mystic. In 1940, the Constitution election was about to collapse, and they appointed him as chair of the Assembly, and he saved it. So he had the mystic sense that I will do the same thing right now. Okay, here we are talking to you.
Wow, amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
No, it's a pleasure talking to you.
When these death threats occurred, what options did he have? What options did your father have? To stay in the country?
Oh no, during the election, he would not leave.
No, he
would not.
would go
No.
to rallies, and he did his campaign mostly on TV and radio.
Okay.
And the people, well, there is a book by Peruvian, I don't know now, that goes through that period, and he really hits the target. He said about a month before the polls, the nation changed. You know, there was a movement toward the electors and so on toward Marquez-Sterling. And Fidel became paranoid and so on because that would be the solution. So
After the election, he's not allowed to serve. What happens to
Who?
Miss Carlos?
My-
Carlos
No,
Marquez-Sterling.
no, Batista stole the elections. So his candidate was supposed to take, on the 1st of January, when Batista leaves, left everybody. And the first person that Che Guevara gets in prison on the 3rd of January is
was my dad.
his dad. And they take him to La Cabaña, you know, the famous
The
place
fortress, yeah.
where the firing squads were beginning. And he accused him of having been sold or bought
that
by
he sold
Batista.
out to Batista.
That the reason he ran the elections is because Batista had bought him. And I don't know how many millions given. Too bad it wasn't true, but anyway.
Boy, I needed them
We would
when
be
I
so
was
much-
working in a supermarket in
Yeah.
Miami.
Right. So but at the time, he was loved and respected.
Very
And also,
respected.
the other factions that had been against Batista respected him too. So when he asked Fidel, should I kill him? I guess Fidel says, no,
No, wait, don't do that.
don't do that yet. So Che Guevara sends him to under house arrest with soldiers around the house to wait for a trial. And he stayed there from January till June. And somehow in June, things were. My mother-in-law was a diplomat. She was the daughter of a diplomat. She would get you. And those militia men that were there serving, she kind
She
of,
had
you
them
know,
in her palm
and
of her
hand. Like it.
fed them and all
Making
that.
cookies
So
and asking to
they
come
were
in.
able to hide him in a car and take him to the Venezuelan embassy and took refuge there. And then Venezuela, the president was a friend of the family, had accepted him as, so he flew to Venezuela and then stayed there for a while and then went to New York. And later my mother-in-law and the girls were reunited with him.
I tell you, those were days because I felt when he left, he had to. When he left, we felt like with no protection. We couldn't say anything and so on until one day they arrested me. We don't go into it. And then I came home and said to Gloria, we gotta get out of here.
Well, because also Castro had sent you a message,
Yes.
and your brother was already out, and he had asked a mutual friend from the university, and where are the Marquez-Sterling? I would like them to join me.
To join them.
And then
my brother said, you cannot say no to Fidel
Well,
Castro.
your brother was already out, but,
But he told me
this
that.
friend that brought the message, Manuel said, "Oh, okay." So he came home and said, "We have to leave."
Yeah.
Really, we had to stay because my father had been very
Yes.
ill. Because by then the whole family had left at little times here and there.
Go
And by
on.
that time, you had a child.
Oh, I had a child too, but
I was
this
pregnant.
was the end of 59.
59.
And then we finally were able to get visas to leave on 1960. I left on the 16th of
17th
of April,
Hey, we
and you
celebrate it
left
every year.
a week before me because they would not give us the visa. But they give you a visa with the proviso that you would return in
you
2
have
weeks.
to return.
And in order for you to get the visa, you had to forfeit everything that you own. And if
Yes,
you were not back in 2
if-
weeks,
They
the
took
state,
everything.
the government would take over everything that you had. So,
So what did you take with you when you left?
well, we couldn't take much because I was only allowed one suitcase and $150. And $50
we couldn't
for the
appear
baby.
like we were leaving the country. No, this
You
is
couldn't
a
leave like,
vacation.
things like I would have taken my pictures and things like that. But why would you take your pictures for the 2 week? So, no, you only took, and I was pregnant, so I
One
only
of
took
the-
maternity clothes.
One of the few things that I could have taken with me and that I miss was a picture that Babe Ruth sent me with dedication. Boy, don't I miss that because that thing would be money if you said it.
Whoa.
I don't know.
If we talk about today, what type of, what countries are working in Cuba or associated with Cuba?
Spain,
Spain,
Italy,
Canada,
Canada.
Italy. Those are the biggest ones. The Cubans can buy anything they want from the United States. The embargo came, not it wasn't a military embargo, was an economic one because
what I wanted.
of the money that they took from all the American businesses and private citizens in Cuba. And the United States said, well, you have to pay that. You just cannot take, And so they established the embargo, which means no credit. Meaning Cuba can buy, and they do buy a lot of agricultural stuff and here and medicines, but they have to have paid
they have to
cash
put the money in an American bag.
before it can be sent to Cuba. Because Cuba has done that to other nations, and the debt they had
Billions.
against Spain and Italy and Canada is incredible.
Millions
So-
he owed the world.
So by what you're saying, the typical Cuban citizen is well-to-do?
$29 a month
$29. So where is this money going?
to the government
To
to
the
be able
government.
to support. And Castro died one of the richest men in the world.
$1,400
thank you.
million.
I mean, if they took that money and put it in the budget of Cuba, But and Raúl is too. I mean, all the top tier, they're very wealthy, and
What do you think, now we have a new president in Cuba, what do you think will change, if anything, under this person?
I would say true change that is meaningful, I don't expect anything.
which be a referendum, an election, would
There'd be
be
cosmetic changes. but
starting to respect the human rights, and companies that make business with Cuba have Cuban workers, but their salaries are paid to the Cuban government, and the Cuban government then skims it and gives it to the people that's the miners in Oriente, that the mines are exploited. I mean, they're not exploiting it. They pay a Canadian for the nickel. Nickel, is it nickel?
The nickel.
Okay.
Yeah.
They pay the salaries in Canadian dollars to the government, and then the government pays the Cuban worker in Cuban pesos. And that's true in the tourist or although
Anything.
the Cubans that work in the tourist industry, they like it because they have
They get the
a
tips.
better, a better deal than the regular Cuban that works in the other.
But they say the rockets and the satellites that go around the world are made with nickel. They speak Spanish. So they are taking the minerals from Cuba.
Spanish is the language. How many of the Cuban citizens speak English as well?
No, what?
Now, I
Yeah.
don't know.
No.
I don't know.
Before, I had English in school from grade school all the way.
Very nice.
And many of my friends came to study in prep schools here. We have and a lot of Americans live. I mean, we used to tell who was living in that house, an American. How do you know? They have screens. Because we never put window screens.
No.
Even though we had insects and things like that, but I guess the mosquitoes were not that bad. You could tell Americans by the screens.
If we were to share some of your fondest memories with the audience today, what comes to mind about your homeland? Gloria, I'll ask you first.
I think my family life. I think Cuba is beautiful.
Gorgeous island.
I think I didn't feel threatened in any way. It was just like living in Plymouth with
Nice
no
comparison.
snow. You know,
Okay.
the neighbors and the family. We did not like the corruption that the government sometimes. And
That's one
that
of the
was
causes
one
of the
of the
downfall.
excuses that Batista used for his coup d'etat, the corruption, and there was corruption.
Plenty.
But we lived well, and yeah, we had poor people, so we have here too. Yeah, I mean,
Well,
people talk about the
usually-
campesinos when they don't go to, the mining towns of West Virginia and all those places that, so we deserve a revolution here for that, right?
So friends, the beauty of the island, its location.
The
Those are
beauty
happy
of the
thoughts.
island.
The future was bright.
The future.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And most of the young people felt okay, free, because the university was open, everything was going on.
There was no, there were more foreigners coming to live in Cuba than Cubans leaving to live in the United States or anywhere
In
else.
1959, there were in Italy, in the Cuban embassy in Italy, the Cuban consulate, 12,000 applications
To come to live in Cuba,
to make
become immigrants, and
Wow.
and they were not that. I had one uncle that went to New York and lived there, but I didn't know anybody that decided to live in the United States except when Batista, the political situation, and of course after
Well,
Castro, everybody.
Cuba had a special relationship with the United States that you would apply to come to the United States as a resident, and I think they have to honor that situation. Why? You said, oh my God, the island will be entered. Cubans were not, let's say, travelers, or no, not travelers, immigrants. They were not because life was easy there. You ate a mango, okay, and you threw the seed on the
That's
ground.
not what made life.
No, I know,
easy,
but you threw the seed in the ground, and 2 weeks later it was growing.
But we have security, and we have
Yes.
we had opportunities. People were educated, and business were dying to come to Cuba and establish themselves, you know. And even the
one of the reasons is being said, if one of these businesses in the United States goes to Haiti, they have to start, once the business is there, by teaching the people how to read and write. And they didn't have to do that in Cuba, so they
Right.
love it.
Right.
Truly.
Plus, you know, yeah, and it was, and the dollar and the peso were the
They were
same.
equal.
We
equal.
were, I mean, either one you could have there.
So
And, you know, there was no,
I could say, you were asking me time ago, I could say in my estimation that I loved the country. I loved the countrymen of Cuba. And being a historian, I said, this island has a tremendous future.
the sugar industry was owned, 60% was Cuban. The other 40% were American and Dutch.
Yeah.
And then people said, well, why would you not make it all Cuban? That was
There was a
because they thought
policy.
the American owners would fight for the price of sugar
In the American Senate.
in the American Senate.
For their own interest, not because they were,
Oh, not for
we're-
Cuba, but
No, because
so we
of
had
their
that
interest.
in order to keep our, that was our main industry.
And is it still today?
No,
No.
they have to import sugar.
And there is another thing that maybe should be mentioned. That was a treaty going back to the 30s that the United States paid the Cuban, let's say a pound of sugar would cost 5 cents, then they would pay 10 cents for it. So, $250 million entered the island without worked for. So, because it was a treaty that they agreed in the 1930s.
We were trying to diversify.
Yes,
and
we
and
were
the
trying to
cattle
do that.
industry was very big. It was growing very, very big. And there were other industries that were trying to, so we would not have to depend on the sugar. Because again, the price would go up and down and then we would suffer. So there were other things that were trying. And tourism was starting. Of course, now the main industry in Cuba now is tourism.
Yeah.
That's how they support all their military programs. You know.
But let me bring this up because it's interesting. In Cuba, the Cuban workers in 1959 had the right to unionize, had the right to collective bargaining, minimum wages, had the right to strike,
And it won't vacation.
paid vacations, and a 5-day week
Labor, yeah.
labor, 8-hour-a-day work, paid maternity leave, and the job secure after that. And boy, oh boy, you couldn't fool around with that because you got a strike.
You know who were the ones that were collecting money for the revolutionary bonds, which was what Fidel started selling? the upper class.
Yes, yeah.
The kids that went to my country club in Havana, they were all selling bonds, and they were rich.
Amazing.
But
The
Amazing
poor
time.
people and the soldiers, the poor people adore Batista, because he would come and they give stuff.
well, he
and,
was
you know,
one of them.
Yeah.
So they look at him like one of them.
When you say one of them, was he born poor?
Oh
Very.
yes, oh
Thank you.
yes.
And
Thank
he was
you.
biracial. He
And
was
he was
Indian,
One of them.
Maybe
the
triracial.
maybe Indian, white, and black.
One of them.
And then
All three of them.
he was extremely appealing.
Very intelligent,
Oh,
very
good.
intelligent, and very.
Very.
He learned. He was self-taught,
Yes.
and
yeah.
he was very literate.
He actually now and then bragged, saying that he didn't say explicitly, but that he was like Lincoln, self-made.
Yeah, he liked to say that.
He liked to think like that.
I'm not sure I asked the question of you, Manny. If there are a couple of words that, what's your memory? What's the memory that you retain about Cuba that touches your heart? Is there something sad that you'd like to share as well?
Well, there are a few, but for me, the symbol of Cuba, and and I felt like that it was a royal palm that grows.
Yeah, but she's not asking you that.
No, no, it's not that.
No, I think we were chatting the other day, and I thought it was just so adorable, and I wanted to bring it up again. And the happy memory that you thought of was
Oh, the happy memories were all at the university.
University.
You know, and 2 blocks from the university, there was what it was called Radio Center, like New York Radio City and all of that. And when the classes were boring, we would just go there to see the shows and the movies and so on. I love that, you know. So,
I think our time is coming to a close, so I really want to thank you again for the time that you spent with us in preparing for this. It's been insightful. As the book, I said it before, the book is informative. I would urge you to read it if you can connect
yes,
with Manuel.
It's in Amazon.com.
It's Amazon.com.
Yes.
It's insightful. And I think because of the current status with a new president taking over, eventually taking over the Communist Party, we should be aware. And it's a small island,
Exactly.
and you've shared very, very well today. It was a visionary island. It did have that. It could have had a totally different destiny. Yeah.
Yes.
So
And let me put a final point to this. One newsman asked a Cuban, "Oh, well, this is terrible. It's a dream that failed." And the guy said, "No, it's a nightmare that has succeeded for 50 years."
Wow.
Okay.
I mean, at the beginning, when the War of Independence, many Cubans wanted to join the United States and become a state. And there was another, says, no, our freedom, you know, and which we had. Because we were almost like, I mean, we were so American, it was incredible, compared to all the other countries in South America and Central America.
But there's no doubt the leaders made the difference.
Oh, yeah.
It is.
Yeah,
For
absolutely.
instance, Mexico is right there, but Mexico has issues against the United States, you know.
We didn't have any.
The war, the New Mexico, California. Cuba had no issues against the United States. By the 1950s, they all had gone.
I'm not sure we had enough time to do what we wanted today, but I want to thank you for sharing your lives and the times when you lived in
Okay,
Cuba.
thank you.
It was a pleasure, always a pleasure. One more time,
Gracias.
please. If you would like to touch base with Manny, if you have questions for him, both of them, please do so. But I would urge you, this is quite a read.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.